protecting Maryland from the rising extreme weather tax. My name is Jamie DeMarco. I'm the Maryland Director at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, and I am pleased to be joined by advocates in support of this policy, as well as our bill sponsors behind us. Delegate Boapo is on his way. There is a hidden tax in Maryland, a tax that we pay every time an extreme weather event strikes, because it is public dollars that are used to rebuild public roads and bridges and prepare our public infrastructure for these increasingly intense and frequent extreme weather events. This tax is scheduled to ramp up sharply in the coming years due to climate change caused by the burning of fossil fuels. There is only one way that we see this year to keep this extreme weather tax from going up, and that is to pass the RENEW Act this year. Every year that we do not pass the RENEW Act is another year where Maryland taxpayers will see rising costs from these extreme weather hidden tax. This is a really important bill, and I first want to turn it over to our Senate sponsor, who is a champion of this bill and has seen firsthand the importance of it and represents a district where it is particularly important. She is a leader on issues of resiliency and preparedness on all issues. It only makes sense that she would be a champion on this bill as well as so many other issues. Our champion, Senator Katie Frey Hester.
Thank you so much. Welcome. Thank you, Vinny. It's great to see you all here today. So there are a lot of bills right now floating around the General Assembly. In fact, EEE has 357 of them. But there's only one bill that will bring hundreds of millions of dollars into the state to keep us safe from the impacts of climate change, and that is the RENEW Act. The RENEW Act will invest hundreds of millions of dollars to forge a cleaner, more robust, and more resilient future for Maryland. As we continue our steadfast efforts to become a greener state, the negative impacts of climate change persist, and they burden taxpayers and threaten our infrastructure and our safety. I represent Ellicott City, a wonderful historic town, which has suffered in the past few years not one, but two 1,000-year flooding events. And we are now spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the Ellicott City Safe and Sound Plan to make sure that the combination of projects that we have to stop the flooding will keep the city safe and sound. And we're on our way there. I also wanted to point out a recent poll. 72% of Marylanders are concerned about climate change. It's the obvious thing to be concerned about. And increasingly, 48% say that they have personally and financially be impacted by it. And yet, in the past several decades, large companies have continued to make huge profits while knowingly destroying our environment. It is time to make those polluters pay. Right now, it's the taxpayers. We are the ones paying to clean up the damage. And as the effects of climate change are exacerbated, these costs are only going to increase, burdening the Maryland taxpayers rather than the companies who have caused the mess. Now we say, no more. Maryland taxpayers will not pay to clean up this mess. Once again, I just want to remind you that these companies in the bill made $500 billion in 2022. That is a lot of money. Overall, Marylanders support 2-to-1 this plan to make the companies that have spent years financially benefiting from pollution pay to clean up our community. And this support is not partisan. Climate change does not discriminate along party lines, and our solution can't either. Thank you so much, and let's pass the RENEW Act.
Thank you so much, Senator Hester. As the senator said, we cannot allow another year of taxpayers having to pay the cost of extreme weather. There is a hidden extreme weather tax that we are being burdened with, and the only way to keep the extreme weather tax from going up is to pass the RENEW Act. We are next going to hear from our secondary sponsor on the House, the incredible Delegate Boapo, who is coming swinging into his role as a legislator and represents Bowie and Prince George's County very well, and a true champion on this issue as well as many other issues, the incredible Delegate Boafo.
Make sure you guys can hear me. Well, first off, let me thank CCAN. Together we have done the Better Buildings Act and now the Renew Act. It's going to be a good year for us. Today, the House Appropriations Committee is going to hear about underwrite. It's an underwrite of $250 million. It's significant. But this bill proposes $9 billion in revenue. Think about that. This whole session, we have been talking about our budget deficits. They're serious. They are real. They will hurt Maryland families in a significant way. We have an opportunity to bring in $9 billion for companies who have profited too long on the backs of working people. And we have that chance to do it today. Over the last few years, we found ourselves contending with record-breaking heat, storms, and wildfires of a magnitude we've never seen before. And at the beginning of the session, we saw here in Annapolis some severe flooding. For far too long, as I said earlier, fossil fuel companies have prioritized profits over the well-being of the planet. And the Renew Act proposes a bold solution. Again, $9 billion in revenue. It ensures that the biggest polluters pay their fair share. You know, I said this at every single press conference we've had, but it rings true today as we're going to hear this bill in the House Economic Matters Committee. You know, I grew up, and it was a very simple lesson. You make a mess, you clean it up. Mm-hmm. And we have an opportunity to ensure that those who have made the biggest mess clean it up. So look, I'm a supporter of this bill. It's funny that David Frazier-Hidalgo couldn't be there today. It's probably because he has 8 bills in our committee today. And I wish he could be here so I could tell him a little bit about how I feel about that. But in all seriousness, this is our chance to do something significant. This is our chance to bring in $9 billion and more. And this is our chance to hold those accountable for what they're doing to our planet. Thank you, guys.
Please come in. These costs are not theoretical. There are real people being harmed. Today at the House hearing, we will hear from Nick, who owns Su Casa. He couldn't make it in time for this press conference, but he shares his story of owning a store that got flooded not once, but twice, from a once-in-a-thousand-year rain event within the span of 2 years. And he speaks about the trauma that he and his staff experience every time they see a rain alert on their phones. Because what if it happens again? What if we're trapped in the basement again? These costs are real, and no constituency is facing these floodings due to a lack of proper infrastructure more acutely and intensely and without the funding needed to be resilient than low-income communities in Maryland. And to talk a little bit about that, I'm going to turn over to the incredible organizer and game-changing, shift-making, power-building house that we have here in Jose Coronado Flores.
Thank you, Jason. Hello, everybody. My name is Jose Coronado Flores. I'm an advocate and policy analyst with the organization CASA, Maryland's largest immigrant advocacy and services organization. I want to start my story and my remarks not in Maryland, but in Guatemala, or El Salvador, or Nigeria, or Sierra Leone. These are the places that are being most impacted by climate change. We see extreme impacts here, but they're stronger and they displace a lot more people in countries all over the world. I start with these locations because this is the homes of the immigrants that are coming to Maryland. And instead of coming to a fortified infrastructure, coming to communities that are safe against flooding, extreme heat, they're coming to broken infrastructure, communities that lie in floodplains that could flash flood at any moment. Flash floods that have been occurring. Today in my remarks in the Economic Matters Committee, I'm going to be sharing the experiences of 2 of our members, Oscar Rojas, who is from East Riverdale, who lives in an apartment community right next to the Anacostia River. 2 years in a row, his family experienced devastating flooding. And he's a baker, and he works at a very low wage. He has limited immigration status, and he doesn't have access to many services. But when he found out his basement apartment flooded right next to the Anacostia River, he rushed in to see all of his belongings completely soaked, completely destroyed. This didn't happen to him once, it actually happened to him twice. 2 years in a row, his family had to rebuild. He shared his testimony about the impacts of flooding and why we seriously need a lot more investment and increase in the comprehensive flood management program of the state. He shared this with the Secretary of the Environment, who sent an inspector to his unit to see that after a year, mold was not remediated. The moisture in his home still remained. It took a secretary to take his concerns and lead to something. The county had to come and force the landlord to fix these problems. This is subtle. This is the effects after the flood, after people have already bought their belongings again and again and again. The Rock Creek Wood apartment community in Rockville, Maryland, experienced 2 years of severe flooding as well. And in 2021, a 19-year-old passed away. These two communities are where CASA members live. They are where the immigrant community live, where the low-income communities live. And they're the most at risk. They have the least amount of wealth to rebuild. For them, it's not just, I'm gonna be able to buy a whole new furniture set. They'll have to spend months and months trying to get that money back. Kids' belongings, kids' clothes. There's so many things that I would say wealthier, middle and up take for advantage that low-income people just cannot. We're here to support the Renew Act. We supported the version of it last year, and we'll continue to support it because the people who are most vulnerable globally, locally, should not be paying and should not have to suffer because our state is not prepared for the intense effects of climate change. So thank you.
Thank you, Jose. I know folks have got to get to committee, so we're going to wrap up, but I want to close by saying that on behalf of the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, I call on Governor Moore, I call on President Ferguson, I call on Speaker Jones to endorse this bill and get this bill through this year. We cannot wait another year where Maryland taxpayers who can least afford it are paying for these damages. We have got to get Marylanders relief from the rising extreme weather tax as quickly as possible. Thanks everyone, and let's come up here for a picture, and then I think we can close out.